the most evil man alive. What did he do? Was he bathing in blood of the innocent? Not exactly. Not exactly. I think he refused to use pronouns. Oh, well, it's basically the same thing as a... click the links for Odyssey, Bit Chute, join the channel, become a member or support channel coffee, or go to the Telegram or the various other links. So, transbullying. This is what you do in the first world when you really have nothing else to focus on. If you got a gang of bullies and nobody stops them, they will continue. And they will change things in a way that is adverse to your interests. In a cultural Marxist system that you're in right now, this kind of soft Bolshevik revolution, there is no way to stop a group who's higher on the oppression ladder from bullying a group who they say is lower, because none of this is real. You can't argue facts and logic versus feelings. So to take a look at what this human monster did, he's saying he's a guy in Hollywood. He's saying he's being bullied on the trans ideology. So let's look at some of the things he has said that is enough to unperson him and make him a wrong thinker. He's talking about his mom. You know, if you have an elderly parent going into a care center, you know, to ask, you want if you're, you know, at 200-year-old lady, you want a woman to be your nurse or something. It's like, well, now that's histophobic, because men can be women too. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, nobody really believes that, but it's I mean, you try to explain it to someone who's over a certain age, it's just not going to click with them. And the thing is, to be fair, you can explain it to people under a certain age, and they all know what you're talking about, but they also, like, they don't believe it. They also know it's just kind of nonsense. So that's one of the things he says. He says it hurts women because if you got an elderly grandmother going into a care center, then you know. Anyway, so he says something about the personal pronoun issue, which is kind of, I think I align myself with this. The concept of if there's an argument to be had, like, just give in and just use people's pronouns, you know, the biologically incorrect pronouns, versus the other argument is like, yeah, but if you do that, you're lying, and you're kind of prolonging this thing. Like, it just continues to go down this path until somebody says, oh, we got to stop this. This is too much. If we just put our foot down and said, yeah, you know what, we're just not going to use these pronouns. It's just, we're going to stick with the biologically accurate one. And if you can't interact with those kind of people, well, I don't know what to tell you. We'll just have to have our own separate spaces, sort of things. Because compelled speech is not a road you want to go down to. Because, you know, ultimately, you're like, well, what if somebody, you know, pick some just nonsense pronouns, which, to be fair, a lot of them are. But what if it was something that was be offensive in other languages or even in this language? It's like, oh, well, of course we wouldn't do that. It's like, the point is like, none of this is real. This is all kind of made up. So he said because he's cognizant of the politicalization of the pronoun uses, that he doesn't use it. He can't observe the pronouns. I think maybe he's meaning like on social media or something like on this. But in a personal setting, he does, which seems, most people would say like, oh yeah, that's a fair compromise. If you're face to face with someone, you're going to try to remember to use their pronouns. And, you know, the thing is, I see stuff now where you've got like a dozen people who are meeting each other on a Zoom call, and they all have like different pronouns, and you know, they're clearly biologically men and women. And usually the thing is, you don't have to remember anything about, that's what the point of a gender-based pronoun is. You don't have to remember anything about somebody. Is like, you just use a he, she pronoun, or, you know, maybe you're using they in some circumstances, but you know what I'm talking about. It's like, oh, you don't remember her name. It's just, oh yeah, she's over there. She's a woman over there. It's like, you don't have to remember her name. Oh, actually, she doesn't use those pronouns. She uses they, zer pronouns. Like, how the fuck am I supposed to remember that? I'm not. Even if it was like a 15-year-old kid, I'd probably, hopefully, I'd be saying the same things. Like, not only am I not going to remember that, but every time I forget it, it's a little tick of hostility. It's like, oh well, is this a microaggression? Are you doing? I don't even care about your microaggression. Anyway, so that's the point he's making about pronouns, is because it's a political thing now. You know, do you really want to give in and use them? Because it feels like, well, what's next? You know, if you can compel somebody to lie, then really, and isn't there just kind of a conscientious objection to it to say like, yeah, I don't want to be compelled to lie through threat of either force or public pressure. Anyway, because none of this is real, you cannot argue facts and logic versus feelings. The humorous way to argue it is what I do a little bit on social media. I mean, I'm kicked off and then I wait a year and go back on Twitter. Is you argue using the same emotional rhetoric that you identify as a marginalized and oppressed, a victim of something, you're disenfranchised and you're othered, that you are the oppressed and can't be the oppressor. You can fully enter clown world and swim deep in her waters if you want. Or you can stick with logic. But keep in mind, a judge of the highest court in the land is afraid to say that a woman is an adult human female, the XX, the bearer of young. If she is afraid to say what a woman is, then logic, that should have, she goes, I can't say, I'm not a biologist. That should have woken more people up. That was bad enough. And then the media coming out and going to bat for her and say, actually, biologists say it's actually pretty, I read this article with the other channel, said they're saying, they're going for bat for her, they go, biologists say it's science. No, they don't say biologists. They science is really tricky about this. It's actually hard to define what a woman is. So they quote gender studies professors and biological philosophers. So I'm reading the article, I'm noticing that, like, you're not quoting hard science, you're quoting philosophy and gender. I think to myself, wait, why don't you just ask a biologist? If you're referring to biology and you're quoting someone you're quoting everyone, or you're sourcing everyone who's not a biologist. It's, how do I say this? A few decades ago, an article like that wouldn't even have got, a few years ago, it wasn't this bad. Say 2015, an article like that would not have got in the mainstream media publication to say that, science is actually really tricky, but we're not going to actually talk to a scientist. We're going to talk to someone in the humanities for an issue of science. That doesn't make any sense. It wouldn't make it past the editor. The editor would look at it, it's like, what? Why did you bring this? I can't approve this. You have to talk to a scientist. If the issue is biology, discuss it with biologists. Oh, I can't do that because they'll disagree with me. Yeah, this whole article is crap. You've just started with a conclusion, and you're trying to bootstrap your conclusion. It's not that you're fired. It's like you just have to learn how to write articles. That's not an article. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would not have seen that in a mainstream media publication. But after that when they're asking her the questions, it's like now you start to see that in mainstream media. Like, scientists don't know what a woman is, so we're going to talk to a gender philosophy professor. That's insane. That's, if they can make you believe absurdities, they can make you commit atrocities, or at least they can stand by while you let these atrocities, damaging children so that they can no longer reproduce. That's, in a philosophical sense, that's a sacrifice to Moloch. That's an atrocity. Sterilizing a kid, yeah, that's an atrocity. Permanently stunting their growth. If that happened, if before America was on board this Bolshevik revolution, and you said, oh, there's some country, Sweden is doing this to kids, people would lose their freaking minds. But it's a slowly boiling frog pot where you look at it like, oh, well, they're just sterilizing children. It's not that bad. It's not my kid. What do I care? It's like, let them have their fun. Yeah, but can they consent? I mean, if they can't consent to contract, you can't consent to something that has long-term consequences. It's kind of weird that you would have somebody consent to this, and the next step is, and I hate to be a burst your bubble and trigger warning, horrific acts against children, and hopefully one day we redress this grievance and we'll commit after legally process or redress our grievances. Is if they're going down this road of consent when they cannot legally consent, because it's not informed consent to go to a doctor if you're under the age of 18, even under the age of 25, really. And then there's an argument to be had that there's a cognitive issue with someone who wants to sterilize themselves. It's like, it doesn't quite make sense. There goes the YouTube channel. And the thing is, you sell this to trans people and they lose their freaking mind. You go, listen, I don't want you to hurt yourself. If I truly hated you, I'd say, oh, go ahead. Because it's kind of Darwinism. If you're doing this to your kids, you're doing it to yourself. It's like, oh yeah, go ahead. If you want to self-harm, knock yourself out. There's most of us on our side, even on the further right, we're like, no, we don't want you to hurt yourself. We're not monsters. Go get some treatment. Go get some help. Like, you don't have to live like this. You weren't meant to sterilize yourself. Like, you always want to leave that option on the table. You want to be straight. You want to be gay. You want to go out and have a little fun when you're young and experiment around a little bit. Knock yourself out. But you don't want to do anything that can't be undone, and you sterilize yourself. That's a one-way trip. You're not gonna, and it's a one-way trip I suspect that a lot of people would deeply, deeply regret. But we're headed for very, very strange days. Anyway, a judge is afraid to say what a woman is, so she needs a biologist. So instead, like the people we're talking about are gender studies PhDs. It's just the most insane thing. Anyway, the thing is, the next people who are probably going to get canceled are going to be the biologists, because they're not interviewing the biologists, because obviously they're going to say something different. And the thing is, eventually they're going to put the screws to the biologists, and the biologists are going to be in this position of saying, they're going to be in a position of lying, of simply to not get canceled if you're on a PhD program or something, or you're in a university. It's like you always answer to something, which is where a lot of this issues dealing with, I'll say, atmospheric physics and ice core data, if you know what I'm talking about. A lot of that science is like people are beholden to someone else, either to a university or to someone, where you can't just come out and say, as a geologist who studies change over a very long period of time, that things are not, you can't come out and say something is against the narrative. Or even to say, like, yeah, the data's not in, you just don't know. Because there's nobody who's truly, truly independent. There's no university like that that's truly, truly independent. So you're going to get, like, when you get something other than science, holy shit, man, anything can happen. What's worse? What's worse than mutilating kids? That's it. I mean, there's nothing worse than that. I mean, that's a sacrifice to some lower demon or something. There's nothing worse than cutting off, than destroying at least the option to sterilize the next generation. That's like broken branch. That's like this genocide, right? Anyway. So they're making up the rules as they go along. What a dark stream this turned out to be. They bootstrap definitions, and then they provide themselves in this bizarre circular source. There's a self-referential. There's a whole study of these people on the left who source themselves and then refer to themselves. One gender studies basket weaving, vagina, lesbian, pottery, PhD, writes an insane paper based on nothing. But then the other insane people reference it, and then it makes the mainstream media, and they use all these what are essentially opinion pieces as factually based research papers. But whenever you shepherdize the source, that's what they do in law. I don't know I forget what that's called in science, but it's it's to trace back things. The original paper is this mushroom fever dream based on nothing. There's the famous case of this POC girl at Princeton who got her PhD in mathematics, and the PhD was all about like the feelings of numbers and the emotions and just nonsense, absolute nonsense. And even that was a bridge too far, because it was in STEM, and they finally said, like, yeah, we can't go down this road because you weaken the PhD program, which it runs on donations. You weaken the university. It's like if you devalue the PhD program, you're going to end the university, which is, so finally that seemed to wake people up. But she got that PhD based on, because she's a POC, and she did her mathematics dissertation on like just some nonsense. I mean, you can look it up, Princeton, and the black lady who got a PhD based on nothing. The thing is, you end up with a society where a judge doesn't know what a woman is, and you can get fired for denying that we were always at war with Oceania, because the truth is now hate speech. So, dark days ahead. Dark days right now. It's like, oh, this is on the horizon. Well, they're already mutilating kids, so I don't know how much worse it could get. Oh, the thing I was circling back to, there's the thing dealing with the age of consent is they're going to argue in a very, very short fucking time that if you can lower the age of consent to engage in surgical procedures for the kids, then guess what they will lower it for the next situation. Oh, your kid can have a boyfriend. Oh, the 30-year age difference? Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know what it would take to get people to throw a revolution. There's like a, I don't know how to call it. Like there's a game theory sunk cost investment. No, that's not it. It's an issue of it deals with diversity. Is like you'll go to bat for your tribe and you'll sacrifice to a greater extent for your tribe than you would for someone else's tribe, and that's how people are seeing things. There's more to it than that, but it is haram to say on YouTube. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. You know, and for a long time, I would have said, like, people who had these feelings like they want to do this kind of stuff, I would say, oh man, go to therapy, go talk to somebody once a week. At least, you know, just the act of talking about it. It's like, even if it's just the act of it, talking about it, the things you focus on, it's like getting it out, you hearing yourself say ridiculous things. It helps you move towards progress. But now I look at the therapist, now I realize, oh, there's a lot of really woke therapists out there. So now, like, if you don't have therapy as an option, I'd be like, oh, you probably need like a group therapy without a therapist, which a few years ago would have been absolutely a horrible thing to say. But I mean, like, you'd need like a based therapy where people are not advocating any positions. It's like you're just there to shoot the breeze, and also you're there because you know you have an issue. I don't know. I don't know. It's just too weird for YouTube. I'll do this I'll edit this last little bit out. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, guys. I'll see you all next episode.